kind of a national team, and there's a lot of different issues that Chris faces in his job. He has worked within the construction industry and the bid environment, and we're going to hear a bit about where he started his journey, where he's aiming to go, and really we're going to run through some questions on how he feels, what his outlook is on bids. So Chris, I mean, I'll kick it off with you. Are you all right to let us know where it started and a little bit more about you and kind of what you've been up to?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess just to start, thanks everyone for joining in. I guess my career started back sort of about 15 years ago, really. Quite an unusual background, I guess, for bids, although I guess most of us don't necessarily set out to be in the world of bids and proposals. So I was always creative when I was younger, really, I wanted to be a graphic designer. So that's what I studied at university, graduated, and, like all grads, really keen to get into that first job. So I applied for a role way out the other side of London. I was just going for anything to get my first job. Yeah. Happened to be an engineering company, actually, and I was it was a kind of dual marketing creative role. They specialised in street furniture, which sounds mega exciting, but means bus stops, bus stations, transport infrastructure, that kind of stuff.
Totally different to what you're doing now.
Well, but I was excited because that was my first job, so it was like, brilliant. So I was, very small business, small team, just two of us doing sort of marketing, the creative work, and so I was, doing like brochure design and websites and that kind of stuff. But I kind of started to get involved in some of the tenders they were doing. So they were going for contracts for TfL and other transport organisations. And actually, what I really liked about that is that you'd have a clear end date to get a result. So when I was doing some of my brochure work and some of the marketing stuff, you could be spending months, developing a brochure, various levels of approval, all this kind of stuff. What I liked about the bid period was that you would have, 3-4 week tender period, and you'd have an end result. You'd have a document, a final document at the end of that. So that's kind of my first sort of step into bids. I've been at that company for a couple of years, and then just keen to, move around, wanting to go into London, being a bit of a hub. So I applied for new roles. That's when the role at ISG came about. So, I went for an interview, really liked the people who were interviewing me, seemed like, just strong leaders for the team. I liked the direction they were taking the team in. They wanted to inject a bit more creativity into their bids, try and stand out from the competition. So that was really exciting. So I was really successful, kind of started at ISG. And I remember my first week, actually, specifically the Friday, because that used to be the day traditionally when we'd have all of our deadlines, around noon on a Friday. And my first week there was just nuts because there was people like binding and printing, couriers rushing in, people making last minute changes.
Chaos.
It was kind of organised chaos, but actually maybe just chaos. But it's a really exciting environment to be in. And I was like, I really like this excitement and the sort of buzz from it. So I guess that was the point. I was kind of hooked on that sort of bid environment, really, and I really liked that. And I was in that role, I think it was proposal editor, it was called, back in the day. So I was in that role for a couple of years. Interested in that time to just get involved in some different things in that team as well. So I was, helping onboard new starters, just looking for, I guess, opportunities to improve stuff in the team. So like back in the day, simple things like our logistics plans we were producing for our construction tenders, real inconsistency across the team and bids inaccuracy. So just looked to create a suite of templates and, doing some training with the team. So just little things like that. And I think all that kind of stuff got me recognised for a promotion. So then I was promoted to proposal manager, then I think senior proposal manager. And at that point, I was more involved in line management and recruitment, and all that stuff was, mega exciting for me at the time because I've not done that sort of stuff before. And I actually were really good. I went on like a 10-day training course, spread out over the year to teach me sort of how to have good quality conversations with our people, learn more about how to, conduct good interviews, all that kind of stuff. So that was really exciting. As I developed in that role, I was working more closely with our head of proposals at the time. And I was kind of shadowing her, learning a bit more about how she works, what some of those responsibilities were, things like work allocation, managing external stakeholders outside of the team. And that positioned me really well because then an opportunity came about to become head of. So I was like, brilliant. That's what I always wanted.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, so I was like, hand up. So I was like, and that's what I always wanted to do, just run my own team. So that was, really exciting. And I remember my first week in that role, actually, we had an away day. We just got all the team out and we were just, doing some brainstorming, talking about what was going well, what wasn't. And that was great. I just love that sort of collaborative environment, people just sharing ideas and talking and all that kind of stuff. So that was great. I think being a head of is a challenging role, though. I think, you've got so many stakeholders. You've got your team, you've got, business units, delivery teams, SMEs, whatever you call them. And you've also got corporate objectives coming from above as well. So you've got a lot of stakeholders. It becomes very difficult to please everyone at the same time, I think. So it's a challenging role, but I did really enjoy that. And then I've been in that role for a while, and the business was making some changes, kind of bringing together our people particularly across the bid community more, where we've been a little bit more siloed. So I created a new role, which was group head of bid management. So I applied for that and I was successful. And that's kind of led me into the role I'm in now, which I started a few months ago, which was director of bids. And I guess this has been the biggest change for me, really, because I suppose it's a bit more isolated. When you're at the head of a team, you've got a team around you and you've got that support. So a little bit more lonely, but it's fine. Don't feel sorry for me.
But everyone's looking to you for a bit of leadership, aren't they, and a bit of guidance, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even just coming to that role yourself, I think as you progress in the business, you find that it's less and less clear what your role should be, and it's more up to you to kind of define that role. So I think at director level, initially I was like, I put loads of objectives together and work out, what I should be doing. And actually, I was trying to do way too much. And I think probably one of the big things is around communication. So it's obviously communication with our teams, our bid teams, but it's also that communication and stakeholder management with senior management, with CEO, COOs, our MDs, and with the business units as well. So I see that being the biggest part of my role, really. And that's kind of taken me up to where I am today.
Because you came from really, I think, and I work with a lot of bid teams in the Midlands based, and I think kind of other people will agree with it, that graphic design is a different avenue to take to get to where you are. You seem to have diversified so much into now being the director of bids at ISG. What do you think that kind of enables you to bring to your team, having that experience?
I just blagged it, really. Nobody noticed. No, I think, I guess what I would say is any good organisation will value creativity in any form. If we look at our bids and proposal teams, we've got a mix of people from different backgrounds, and I think that's true of probably a lot of organisations. We have people from marketing backgrounds, writing, design, even presenting and acting, actually. So a real diverse mix. And I guess if you start thinking about the philosophy of, some people are more left-brained or right-brained, and left is more process and methodical, and right is more, creative and artistic, I think it would be a miss not having a bit of both of those in your organisation, but as well as your team as well. So you get broader perspective, different ways of solving, I guess, challenges. And I suppose from my early days in proposals, I'd use that creativity to kind of visualise our win strategy. So we'd always say we'd want our clients to pick up our documents and go, like before they even open that first page, go, wow, ISG, they understand us, they get my issues. In everything we've done there, just sort of set that early impression. And now, our proposal teams do that as standard. And there's some incredible stuff coming out of our proposal team, stuff, far beyond the sort of stuff I was doing back in the day. But if I bring it forward to now, I guess that kind of creativity and that sort of visual element of me it probably helps me communicate more clearly. So when I'm doing internal presentations or I'm trying to get across a new idea, the fact that I can communicate that visually when we're doing a presentation or whatever it is, it just helps me get my messages across clearer. I think it's definitely something that still supports me in that role.
Yeah, I think communication has to be when we speak to bid professionals, and we speak to a hell of a lot of them, myself and Dave, communication seems to be the huge driving force that's behind every single bid team. It doesn't matter if it's small, medium, or an international monster of a company like ISG. You're a force to be reckoned with, really. Yeah. And I think communication has to play a huge part. And I love the fact that you said about problem solving. bids are problem solving. And I think you've got to be a problem solver, which obviously you are. And you bring that to your team. I mean, your career, and you've kind of got to, I guess, really the top of your game when it comes to the bid arena, and especially with ISG. What do you think has been the biggest challenge that you've faced up until this point, considering that you did come from a graphic design perspective? And like you said, you're now the director that is directing your whole business, really, and where they go and how they do it.
Yeah, I think, I suppose one of my biggest challenges has been the fact that, for the last 11 years, I've been working in a construction company, but I'm not a construction professional. So, I don't know my pilot
route, crazy, isn't it?
My luff and jib or whatever it is, So I think that's been a challenge. And I guess probably in my early days in my career, I'd feel like I'm in a start meet with all these, construction professionals, and I didn't know what they were always talking about. I didn't feel like I could always add value in those meetings, and wrongly, but as my perception at the time was, I was the guy going off doing the pretty pictures and that kind of stuff, and probably didn't have the respect to add value in those situations. That kind of perception changed over the years, and actually you realise that sort of anyone can add value to any meeting. You don't have to be an expert. You can say things like, I'm not an expert, have you considered this or thought about this? And I guess it comes back to the whole thing around the two sides of the brains and just having a different view or different perception of a problem. So I think, that's definitely probably been a challenge that I've kind of come through. And I think a few years I was having some external coaching, which I'd recommend for anyone who's just got some objectives that they want to talk through. And one of those objectives was around, when you're in a situation where you've got a load of construction professionals in a meeting room, how do you hold your own? How do you add value? And really it's being bold and brave. And I think you'd be surprised that, people will listen. If you just say, look, listen to me, I think we could be doing this. I might be absolutely wrong. Just accept you could be wrong, but by getting your voice out there, you'd be surprised that, people stand up and listen.
Yeah, and I think it's scary, isn't it? I think you hit the nail on the head, and you've got to be brave. And everyone's got a role to play in construction. I think we work in print, and I always say I don't really need to know about how a book is put together or a document or a website is put together, because I have experts that need to do that. All I need to do is understand and potentially add a bit of creativity and an idea around it. So I fully get that. And I love the fact that you said about being brave and putting yourself out there. And it's got to be hard for you. You're based in London. You have been based in London. Mm-hmm. How do you because you've got a national team, right, Chris?
We have a national proposals community of about
how do you bring people together? And I know you said that when you first started ISG, you loved the fact that you got together, you bounced ideas, you were talking. How do you bring that into 2021, especially with the pandemic and stuff? How do you bring your team together?
That's a good question. I think, like I said, we've got 60 odd bid professionals, bid writers, bid managers, proposal people, and that's globally. So we've got people in continental Europe, Asia, Middle East, and a lot of those teams are still kind of regional focused in terms of their workload. We still talk, and so when people need support on a specific tender, a resource, they're at a pinch point, or a specific skill set, we'll share that and we'll talk through that. I think the important thing is making us feel like we're part of a community. So actually, if we've got 2 people out in Germany and they're part of like a small pre-con team, and they might even have a bit of a dual role doing a bit of proposals, a bit of marketing or something, it's kind of making them feel like they're part of this much bigger team, this much bigger community of 60 odd people. And through that, we can share, innovation, best practice, all of that kind of good stuff. But just make people feel like they've got this whole network of people that they can talk to. And through that, we manage, formal and informal comms. So there's stuff where people get to know each other and they can just pick up the phone and speak to each other, or Teams or whatever. But we have more formal comms. So we'll have things like our bi-monthly bid forum, where we just get all of those guys together. We'll talk about sort of pertinent topics. We'll get some people to do some training, maybe get some people from the business to talk about initiatives they're running, all that kind of stuff. And also this year, actually, we're doing our first global sort of bid team end of year event. So we've got a few days where we're just going to invite people from across the global teams, across the regions, and we're going to do like a mix of events. So we'll do some workshops, some training, hopefully some socials, but just, the key thing is just people getting to know each other better, building really good relationships, but also doing a bit of upskilling, a bit of sharing. We've got our CEO who's going to join us and do a bit of a business update, and just, share his appreciation with the big proposals teams and recognition for the late nights and all that kind of stuff.
And I think that's good, because I think you can be very isolated. Like you said, it can be quite lonely, your job. So working for a national team, it's easy to get lost, isn't it, with everyone else? And I think your end game, like any bid team's end game, is for their end user, their client, to be happy and to pick up that bid and have a unified response, where you can basically, like you said, you can pick the brains of a colleague that's in Germany, pick the brains of someone that's in London, bring it with some creativity from someone from the Midlands, and pull a bid writer from Manchester, let's say, for argument's sake, and give your best end products, I guess, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
This is the thing. I think there's a lot of people out there, and we've had feedback while we've been doing our training and webinars, and we've been engaging with a hell of a lot of people. And a lot of bid teams do struggle with a disconnect sometimes, be it if that is a national company, be it if it's a small or an international company, whatever the situation that they're in, they can struggle with a disconnect. Could you offer them any advice of how can they combat that, and what would you do in their position if they were struggling to bring people in together? And
well, I think it's always a constant, not battle, but it's about continuous improvement and constantly reflecting, I guess. Really, one thing I would say is I think probably the pandemic, if it's taught us anything, is location is not as important as it used to be. So if I go back to our bid forums, actually, we would, before the pandemic, be running them, and we'd have a bunch of people in the meeting room, predominantly in our London team, and have a bunch of people on the screen. And you'd always have a bit of an unconscious bias to those people in the room, actually. When the pandemic hit, obviously that was entirely remote, but actually become much easier to manage because you're addressing everyone equally on the screen. And we said we continue that post-pandemic, actually. It just feels like a better way of working. I think also it's utilising technology that's out there now. So again, our forum, something that's really helped is using our Teams breakout rooms. I think you can do it in Zoom and all that kind of stuff. But where we've got 60 odd people in that community, if you're having a call like this, it's very difficult to have meaningful discussion, everyone to get their thoughts across nowadays. Obviously, some people not comfortable talking in a community that large. So we've really utilised those breakout rooms now where we can be talking about a topic. We can kind of, those 60 people can go into 10 rooms, but, 6 people in each room. And then they can be talking about a particular subject, come back to our team. And actually it means that everyone has an opportunity to speak. We probably get a wider mix of ideas as well. And we're also mixing those teams. So everyone's getting to know each other. So yeah, I think definitely utilising some of the technology, I think can definitely help. And again, I think, I don't think location is a barrier that it used to be.
But the communication's still fundamentally key, regardless of where you are. I think that's a big thing that, especially from my perspective, communication has to be key. And like at Hobs, we see a hell of a lot of, can you do this? And we need to get this done. And this needs to be at the ends of the earth by tomorrow at 2. And it's 12 o'clock that day. And we work towards really, really strict constraints. Obviously, being a printer with the end person that touches or signs off that bid or sends over the graphic design support over. And I think that's a big thing, that when you're involved in such a time-pressured situation that bid teams are, regardless of what you're bidding for, you have that end deadline. How do you combat time constraints? Because we see very, very late nights / early mornings, dependent on how you look at it. But we have emails at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, and people eating that cold takeaway while they're hovering over a boardroom table. How do you combat that as a leader at your business?
I suppose firstly, the late nights, early mornings, weekends and that, it shouldn't be taken as the norm. I think we've got a responsibility as leaders in the bid community to kind of drive that out and make that process more efficient. I think there's always going to be times when you've got a short tender period of 4 or 5 weeks. It's a really, really key tender. And we've got passionate people in our teams who just want to get a brilliant job over the line, and they want to work late, and they might do a bit of work over weekends. And I think that's okay, and it's sort of an expectation, an exception in the role. But I think there'll be times when actually, if that's just because it's bad or poor management of that process, poor behaviours, that's kind of unacceptable, really. That's affecting the well-being of our people. So some of the stuff we're doing, we're actually looking at doing some workshops with our stakeholders, because we've definitely identified there's been a little bit of a disconnect throughout the pandemic where people have been remote, people on site, that kind of thing. Yeah. So we want to re-engage with some of our stakeholders across the business. And funny enough, we just had a meeting this morning on that. And we want to kind of, reset expectations, but have a mutual understanding of challenges we're facing and, what we're up against. And through that, we're on a series of workshops. I just want to get the best out of each other so that, we are more efficient in that process, we're getting a better end result, and so that, we're managing people's time more efficiently. I think also we've got some really good leaders in our business. We've got really good heads of our teams who, their people is the absolute priority. So they're making sure that they and their managers are having really good conversations about, development and progression and that kind of stuff. We've got wellbeing champions and people in those teams who are, looking at activities, things we can do so that people are not going from bid to bid, but they've got some, some time to focus.
It's keeping the energy up, isn't it, Chris? It's keeping people motivated and hungry for it, really, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think, just a couple of weeks ago, I know some guys in London from pros and bid teams were doing a bit of a charity away day. So again, it just kind of gets those guys working together a bit more collaboratively, getting to know each other, a bit of a breakaway from bids. So I think that's been really good. And I think there's one thing that we do as a business actually is we take part in the Be Heard survey. So I'm not sure if anyone on the call's heard of that, but it's an annual survey that we take part on and completely anonymous. Our employees answer a bunch of questions on different subjects from leadership, well-being, my team, my manager, and we get a report back that shows how we're faring as a business, also how we're doing as a team. And it's really, really good because it gives you a focus on actually, you can build an action plan from that feedback. So actually, do we need to do a bit more around our managers to make sure they're having good conversations? Do we need to provide a bit more training? If well-being is low, what can we do to improve that? So that's been a really useful tool for us at ISG. And we've been doing it for the last, I think, 3 or 4 years. And actually, we've seen constant progress on that. So even through the pandemic, where we're expecting a bit of a dip, people having, a tough time through that pandemic where they've, managing childcare at home, all that kind of stuff. We constantly improved on that. So I think, that's been a really useful tool for us.
Yeah, I think, do you know what? It's really good when you open yourself up to feedback from your team or your peers, especially in a manager's position. I think it's good to, especially when it's anonymous, people can be a little bit more cutthroat with it, can't they? Yeah. And you can really get to the nitty gritty. I know, Chris, you've mentioned like the pandemic, and obviously I think every single person on this call, we've all experienced, we've been through a chaotic 18 months, to say it honestly. And I think, how do you feel kind of bids were affected? I know you touched upon the fact that your shareholders, you feel that there was probably a little bit of a disconnect because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. How do you feel that had an impact on bids for ISG?
Well, I suppose firstly, there was definitely no slowdown. So, we were, probably busier than ever, really. I imagine this is similar for everyone on the call, but the pipeline become very volatile, very difficult to predict and manage resource allocation. So where we're planning months in advance, we're then planning sort of weeks in advance. And bids were dropping, from nowhere at times, or just being put on pause. So it was challenging. I think a positive to take away from that is that, we maintained profitability throughout that period. So I think that's a good, obviously a good sign for us as a business, but I think the industry as a whole. I think probably one of the biggest areas for us that it has affected is probably post-tender interviews. So where our people are getting in front of clients and consultants, traditionally that's been in person in a meeting room. And obviously that's almost been entirely remote now. So I think that's taken a bit of upskilling and people getting used to using that technology. And I think, for us now, I guess a couple of years ago, we never would have thought about, having like a studio in one of our offices to do presentations from, but actually it feels like it could be quite a feasible solution now. So So I think that's definitely had a big impact. And I think probably even our bid documents themselves, again, coming back to printing and that kind of stuff. Obviously, a lot of our clients consultants haven't been in the office through the pandemic or at different stages of that.
Yeah.
So doing soft copies gives us a chance to think, actually, how can we be a bit more innovative? How can we present our documents a bit differently? And I think that will probably continue going forward to a certain extent. And I think there'll be a bit of a mix of print. And personally, obviously, I've got a design background. I'm quite excited to see a little bit more print, some of the sort of touchy-feely stuff. But I definitely think it's given us an opportunity to think, actually, how could we be doing things differently?
Yeah, see, this is the thing, isn't it? And I mean, you guys have had to look at it, and I guess there's going to be people on the call that have totally changed their approach to working towards a bid and how they work towards it. I mean, what do you feel the benefit of the working practices that you and your team have adopted during the pandemic brought to your teams?
Well, I think, I guess, if anything, the pandemic has probably given us a greater understanding of a good work-life balance. And I think, to be honest, it's been up and down for loads of different people through that pandemic. I know some people have had really tough times when you've got parents working and they're trying to manage childcare and homeschooling and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's probably, I guess if we look at the 9 to 5, is that like a bit of a dated concept now? Because I find that people work in different ways. Some people like to start really early and get a head start, and then others who maybe start a bit later want to, smash through the evening and work a bit later. I think, again, you've got people with different priorities. So whether that's, people with kids, people, looking after elderly parents, or just with social commitments, people have got different stuff going on outside of work, and that's good. So I think definitely there's been a perception change on how we can improve that work-life balance over the pandemic. And I think, understanding for how different people work. I guess, for me in particular, I've, probably back in the day, I'd be the kind of person I'd quite happily work through the evening and get loads of work done. But now I've, got a little daughter, and I've changed. And actually, I'm really productive in the morning. I get up at sort of, 6:30, whatever, got my bowl of cereal on my laptop, I'm going through my emails when I'm at home. And then actually it gets the afternoon, and I do tend to slow down a little bit. So actually my daughter's home, I'll be like, right, okay, we can just take her across the park for 20 minutes or something. So it gives you a bit more of a balance. So I think, I definitely think that's something we've learned from the pandemic.
So from your experience, and that it's flexibility, isn't it? And I think we've all kind of got into it is definitely flexible working. And if you wake up at 7 and you can crack on and get your job done, then I don't think there's a boss in the land. My boss is on here somewhere that will disagree with the fact that as long as you get your job done, and I think with bids you've got deadlines. So from your perspective and your department, do you think that's something that you're going to continue with, the flexibility of working when you can and working when suits you? And are you going to really concentrate on that moving forward? And is that going to be something that you work towards and grow with?
I definitely think we're already starting that. We're coming back into the office, and I think a balance is absolutely key. I suppose we've learned that actually from great working from home, and there's some positives. I think we've also probably learned that there's some negatives working from home as well. So I think, one of the things I picked up on returning to the office is actually I put far too much pressure on myself trying to work from home, being 100% productive all day. And then you come back into the office and you realise actually you can't fit all of that in, because you're bumping into different people and you're having different conversations. But that's all good stuff. Meet somebody at the tea point, like, oh, can I just soundboard something off you, or you overhear something, you think, oh, it's a really important update that helps you with this. So as much as we've learned from that flexibility, I think it's also worth reflecting on the fact that there's still a really important place for the office and the workplace to create an environment of kind of creativity and for colleagues to get to know each other and spend some time together, which build better relationships. You're more productive. So I think I think there'll be a real balance going forward, and I think definitely taking those lessons from the pandemic is definitely going to improve how we work, and hopefully from doing that you get the best out of people as well. You're working around times that suit them, they can get off and do their social things. So I think,
well, you're getting the best out of people, aren't you? And I think that's a big thing. And I think, as I've loved working from home, but I've missed human contact.
Yeah.
So speaking to people, and I guess comes to building relationships on screen's fantastic, but you do fall down short.
Yeah.
And you miss that personal touch, that bit of banter before the meeting, and all the fluffy stuff, I guess, that goes with doing a presentation, meeting shareholders, meeting your end user client. I mean, kind of in your opinion, this is a bit of a wide ball shot, if I'm honest. So forgive me. I mean, we've gone through a lot of changes. You've mentioned about that when it comes to technology and the impact of what the pandemic's had on you and your team and ISG as a whole, really. I mean, what one thing do you think will have the biggest change on the industry over the next 12 months off the back of it?
I suppose going back to, having a bit more flexibility in how we work, I think will probably open up our talent pool and our talent pipeline more. So where there might have been people who were, I don't know, like parents or whatever, who didn't want to be in the office for long hours, we can give them a bit more flexibility. I think because location and geography isn't such a big issue now, we can look a bit further afield for candidates. And, especially people who might not want to be in the office so much, or actually could be positioned in another office supporting one of our teams. It's a real mix. So I think it definitely opens up that talent pipeline, and hopefully there's some really good untapped talent out there that we could make the most of. I think also as part of that, I think that our industry is becoming more recognised. I think back in the day, people kind of like, what's a bid person do, a proposal? It's like, this dark arts, but I think it's becoming more well recognised. I think you just have to look at the APMP. I think they surpassed like 10,000 members early this year. So I think, it shows that it's becoming more of a career that people can kind of actually start to think about getting into. I guess, I suppose the fact that I'm in the role I'm in now, traditionally, a bid team reporting to sort of pre-construction directors and that kind of thing. I think the fact that I'm a director of bids is hopefully recognises the importance, particularly ISG places on bids and proposals. And I think as part of that as well, if we get all of that right and we're kind of selling our industry, we can start to attract the next generation of talent and grads and, people before their grads as well. So actually, rather than people going, I fell into bids and proposals like most of us have, people actually at school or university or whatever thinking, actually, this is really a career that I want to get involved in. So I'm kind of hoping that's kind of where we can get to over the next 12 or 18 months.
Yeah. Hopefully, Chris, I think that's the big thing. I think bid teams and the bid industry as a whole, you hit the nail on the head. It is like a dark, like a black. It's kind of imperative for the life cycle of any business to tender and bid and build those relationships. And I think even people out on site, and I know we've got Ian on here that knows the process through years and years, that you go through that process. And I don't think people actually, I don't know whether they think that projects just get given and stuff like that. So I think people will definitely start falling through into the bid arena, and hopefully you get some real good talent that come through over the next couple of years. We're waving the flag anyway for big teams. So, Chris, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to open it up now. This is a scary bit for Chris. I've been clammy-hammed. I'm going to watch Chris start sweating now. We're going to open it up to any questions that anyone's got. So be it if it's around bids or if it's about ISG in particular, or we've got a question, I'm hoping, with Bart. Bart, have you got a question that you'd like to ask?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned communication is the biggest part of your role. And you sort of said that, when you communicate, you try and use graphics to make sure your messages are better understood. What do you do to encourage others to communicate with each other, or is there anything specific that you've introduced since you've taken on the role to encourage others to communicate with each other?
That's a good question. I think that's a good point. You could have just one person, one group of people communicating really, really well, but actually you're not going to get to where you need to get to. So if I go back to some of the stuff we're doing with some of the workshops with our teams, our key stakeholders, we're actually looping in all the relevant sort of other teams who support that process. So, like estimating and a BIM visualization team, as well as those key stakeholders at various levels. So I think is making sure that, you've got all those right people involved and they're kind of, you're aligned, and it's not always easy having so many people involved, different people with slightly different opinions. But obviously, again, coming back to that whole, I suppose, two sides of the brain, it's getting a well-rounded perception of and solution to that problem.
Great.
Thanks, Chris. Has anybody else got any questions while we've got Chris in the hot seat? Oh, Stuart Moss, we've got a raised hand. Ready when you are.
So I'm new to this Google thing, so forgive me.
Am I, Stuart?
And please forgive me. I've struggled to join the meeting, so I've come in late. If I go over old ground, I'm sorry. But so I'm a graphics manager at Skanska and manage graphics and visualization in our infrastructure operating unit. I'm quite interested, Chris, to understand how you engage with your SMEs, either before a bid or during a tender, to help develop that visual aspect of the content. We tend quite a lot to engage later than I would like with SMEs, especially around that strategic thinking and that operational modelling, which so desperately needs a lot of visualisation in tenders. Do you have any specific model or approach with your SMEs that you take for your tenders?
Well, good question, Stuart. I suppose, well, I haven't directly been involved in that world for I guess, a few years now, but I can definitely reflect on some of my experience in that. We've got our head of proposals who kind of, really support her team, kind of having really good, strong, conversations with our SMEs. I suppose the biggest focus, as you would have missed the beginning bit, is trying to communicate our win strategies is really, really important. And we want our clients to instantly, before they've opened up that document, go like, oh wow, they kind of get what we want. So where we can, and we are on a bit of a journey with this, is trying to engage, particularly on those key bids before that bid lands, trying to understand all that strategy, making sure there's only so much you can do without the team's input. So you need them to have all the really good conversations with clients, consultants. Hopefully they've got those good relationships so they know what those hot buttons are really. Then our teams normally have kind of reflect on those, have a bit of a kind of design strategy. So start kind of visually showing all the our ideas. Taking the SME through that journey of, right, these are the things you've told us. Actually, we've done a bit of research into this for this reason, and then this is how we've got to this idea. So you kind of take them through that process, and I find that tends to land better than just giving them a design and them going, what the hell's that? Why have you used orange? Or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about anyone else on the group, but I tend to exist. It's obviously got a lot better, but I've tended to exist in that post-blue review period where the first drafts are done, and that's at that point everybody's starting to sort of describe their ideas and their thinking. But that some bids are like we just done one that had 4-week time period, so you can imagine it's almost impossible to do anything meaningful in 4 weeks. But we do a lot of public sector tendering, so we've got one which is going to be 5 or 6 months, which is a lot better. So we do tend to engage earlier. So, and
I think it's very dependent on the bid, I think, as well. There's got to be an expectation that some of those bigger, longer tender periods, you can do a bit more, or even if it's a smaller tender period, but about it further in advance, you can do it more ahead of time. But some of those much shorter tender periods, there's only so much you can do, isn't there? I think.
Well, we do that, and we do that now. We do tend to do a graphics and writing workshop beforehand with the bid team, and at that opportunity, you show them what the campaign visual is going to be looking like, and how we're going to approach the tender and the content design. So, and those seem to be, when you've got the longer bids, that's when it's better, obviously. But thank you for that.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, Stuart. Have we got any other questions or any other comments for Chris?
Chris, it's Phil from Hobs Manchester. Just out of interest, Have you found over the past 12 to 18 months during the pandemic that there has been opportunities for new client development relationships, or has it been more so that the existing client relationships that you've got has generated the project wins through the pandemic?
I think it's been a real variety, really. So I think we've noticed. Oh, sorry, a bit of an echo. I don't know if it's coming from you, Phil.
Oh, it might be. Just bear with me 1 second. Sorry.
Well, no worries. Yeah, I think we've seen a real variety there. I think we're quite lucky at ISG because we cover quite a diverse range of works. So actually, where we've seen some changes, particularly in the office fit-out market, there's other areas of our business like advanced manufacturing, which have really taken off actually, and a really big area of kind of development for the business. I think, to be honest, though, even in the office market, some of the changes we've seen there have been that maybe some of our clients are not looking for such massive offices, but they're looking for different types of offices. But even seeing some of our clients who traditionally might be outside of London, even coming into London, which is kind of unexpected. So I think we're just seeing a bit of a change in terms of the culture of how people work in offices, and obviously other parts of our world and our sectors. Things like healthcare have gone up as well. So I think there's just been changes as you would expect over a period of a pandemic. We're also involved in a lot of the logistics and distribution centre type work, and that's been massive. When you think of the supermarkets and the Amazons and all those kind of places. So just been a bit of a redistribution, I guess, of priority areas.
Yeah, I think it seems very, very similar with the way Hobs have seen their business develop and how ISG have diversified as well. I think, albeit there has been new opportunities, what I think one of the things that we've seen is the existing relationships that we hold with our clients, and the trust that's there. We've seen customers from all varying sectors really come together and stick with us and help us through as a business. So it was interesting for me to understand whether it's similar in other sectors such as construction or architecture or engineering, where you'll all have your existing relationships and your existing clients, but those opportunities to develop new relationships with clients you may not have dealt with, have they come about more so now during the pandemic, or would you? I mean, in terms of percentage wise, would you say that you've still got or would you have a higher percentage of existing clients as opposed to opportunities for new clients?
No, I think there'll definitely be probably a few new clients that have jumped in there, but I don't think it's been affected dramatically, to be honest. I think we've got a lot of strategic key account clients, and we're still doing a lot of work with them. So I don't think it's affected us massively, to be honest.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that. Cheers, Chris.
Well, thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Phil. So have we got any other questions while we've got Chris still? We're quiet, which is always good. So I'm going to wrap it up. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and allowing us to put you in the hot seat. It's always a bit sweaty palm time when people start asking questions, but we appreciate the questions that we've been asked. Thank you to everybody. We do have our next session, which is next Tuesday. It's going to be focused around social values and the commitment around what businesses are facing. And it's tied in with bids. Social value seems to be the talking point of a lot of our clients at the moment. So we've got that next Tuesday at 12:30 with the lovely Tom Story. These sessions are going to be recorded. So if any of you need any recordings, or I'm going to hold Chris to this, if you've got any questions that you want to send over, we can forward them over to Chris and hopefully get a response for you behind closed doors. So thank you once again for everyone that's joined us. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you at our next session next Tuesday. See you later, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.